The lighthouse keeper's final entry. I took the lighthouse keeper position because I needed to disappear. Not literally. I wasn't running from anything criminal or dramatic. I just needed a place where nobody expected me to be someone. The lighthouse on Mercy Point seemed perfect. Isolated. Routine. A job that asked nothing of me except to keep the light turning and write down what I saw. The agency that hired me was efficient but strange. They sent me a single box of supplies, a key, and a typed letter explaining the basic. The lighthouse had been automated for years, they said, but they preferred to keep a human presence. Why, they didn't specify. I arrived on a gray morning in October. The lighthouse was older than I expected, maybe 90 years old, all white paint and rust-spotted iron. The keeper's cottage sat 50 yards away, small and spare. Both buildings felt less like structures and more like something the sea had spat out and forgotten to reclaim. On my second day, I was exploring the light room when I noticed something odd. Behind the massive Fresnel lens, wedged into a gap in the mechanism, was a logbook. It was leather-bound, weathered, with no name on the spine. I knew I shouldn't read it. Whatever the previous keeper had written was private, and I respected privacy in ways most people didn't understand. But something made me open it anyway. The entries were dated across 3 years. The handwriting was neat, almost mechanical, and the observations were dry and precise. Clear skies, visibility 10 miles, light functioning, nominal, that kind of that. And the kite of the high tide. The entries started to change, not dramatically at first. Notice the fog moves backward sometimes, probably optical illusion, wind currents. Then, the rocks below are arranging themselves. Can see them shift when I'm not looking directly at them. Confirmed it 3 times now. Then, the light is brighter than it should be, brighter than the bulb allows. The brightness comes from somewhere else. The final entry was dated for the day after tomorrow. I checked my phone to be absolutely sure of today's 20th. The entry was written for 2020. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the cottage kitchen and read the entire logbook straight through, my hands shaking. The progression was unmistakable. The keeper had started noticing things that didn't fit. Small wrongnesses, details that didn't align with how reality was supposed to work. And his writing reflected his deteriorating confidence in what he was observing, or in his own mind. He was asking himself, over and I imagining it. The entries became fragmented. The light rotates backwards sometimes. Not the light, it's eps. Not the et. The beam goes counterclockwise. I've confirmed this multiple times. I'm sure. Then the sea smells different. Smells like childhood. Like a specific day in childhood that I can't quite remember. When I try to think of the memory, it dissolves. Then I can't leave. I don't know how to leave. The road out keeps moving. And finally, in shaky handwriting that looked like it had been written near darkness, tomorrow stop writing. Tomorrow the light takes over the log. I can be feel. I told myself it was a hoax. Someone pranking me. I searched the cottage for any signs of the previous keeper. There was almost nothing: a toothbrush, a single change of clothes in a drawer, a coffee mug with a crack across the bottom. It was like whoever had lived here had abandoned the space mid-existence and never looked back. I called the agency. The woman who answered had a voice like a recording. Yes, that's typical, she said, when I asked about the previous keeper's departure. Lighthouse keeping isn't for everyone. That's Pat's out. You'll be fine. What happened to him? I asked. We don't keep records on that, she said. Your job is to keep the light turning and maintain the log. That's all. I should have left then. Most people would have, but I didn't. I was curious, and I was stubborn, and I had nowhere else to go. I decided to stay for 3 months and keep my own observations. I decided I would be rational and scientific about what I saw. I decided I was stronger than fear. The wrongnesses started small. On my plaque, like the lighthouse itself was alive and respiring. I checked the wiring. It was fine. The bulb was new. It did it again the next night, and the next. On day 7, I looked at the rocks below the lighthouse and realized they had been moved. I'm certain they had been in different positions when I arrived. I took photographs, dated and time-stamped. The next morning, the rocks were back where they should have been. I checked my photos obsessively. On day 10, I smelled it. That childhood smell the logbook mentioned. For me, it was the scent of my grandmother's kitchen. a place I hadn't visited since I was 12 years old. It was so specific and so vivid that for a moment I was completely confused about where I was. The smell lasted for maybe 30 seconds, then disappeared, and I couldn't recreate it or identify its source. On day 12, I noticed the road. I wasn't planning to leave, but I went down to the cottage and looked at the gravel road that led inland, the one that connected the lighthouse to the small town 5 miles away. The wave Wold writes, I walked it for 20 minutes and didn't make progress. The town didn't get closer. Eventually, I turned around and came back. The walk back took 5 minutes. That night, I wrote in the agency-provided logbook they'd left for me. I wrote, road unusually long at sunset. Atmospheric conditions may be affecting perception. It felt dishonest. But I was starting to understand why the previous keeper's writing had started to fracture and doubt itself. I began to notice something else. The light in the lantern room were bright with an inch had hit fan and hit. Not by a huge amount, but it was measurable if you knew to pay attention. And the brightness didn't come from the bulb. It seemed to come from the glass itself or from inside the mechanism. The light was generating its own illumination. On day 17, I woke up in a different position than I remembered falling asleep in. I was on the opposite side of the bed, facing the wall with the blanket wrapped around me differently. I had no memory of moving. I told myself I'd been dreaming. But my heart was pounding. I realized I couldn't remember my name. It was there. I knew it was there, but the moment I tried to think of it, it became slippery, like trying to catch oil with my bare hands. I panicked. I looked for documents. There was nothing. My wallet was in the cottage, but I couldn't make myself open it. I was terrified of what I wouldn't be able to find inside it. That night, I sat in the light room and looked out at the sea. The beam swept across the water in its rotation, and I watched it go around and around. The rhythm was hypnotic. The light was so bright. It was more alive. I understood then what the previous keeper had been trying to tell me. The lighthouse wasn't just a structure, it was something else. Something that existed in the gaps between normal things. Something that needed to be fed not bulbs or electricity, but keepers. Observers. People who sat in the light room night after night and watched and wrote and slowly, gradually, became part of the lighthouse itself. I thought about the logbook entry dated for tomorrow. For day 22, I understood that when I opened that for in handwriting that looked like mine but wasn't quite, describing observations I hadn't made yet, maybe describing what happened to me. I could leave now. Even if the road moved, even if it bent and stretched, I could probably force my way out. I could call for help. I could burn this place down. But here's the thing about reaching a certain kind of desperation. You stop wanting to leave. You stop wanting anything at all except to understand. And understanding, it turns out, requires submission. It requires sitting in the light and letting turn you into something else. I went down to the cottage. I opened my logbook to the next page for tomorrow's date. My hand moved without my conscious direction. I wrote, the keeper finally stops fighting. The lighthouse stops fighting too. We become the light. We become the turning. We become the turning. We become the observation that observes itself. Tomorrow, it will all be clear. I don't remember writing those words, but there they are in my handwriting, waiting for tomorrow to arrive. The light it is right, it's bright It's where my eye. You're not supposed to be able to leave. The road moving is the lighthouse being merciful, giving you the illusion of choice, giving you time to accept what you are becoming. In 2 days, another keeper will arrive. They'll bring a box of supplies and a typed letter. They'll find this logbook behind the lens and they'll read my entries. They'll tell themselves I was mad. And then they'll settle in and they'll start to fight it like I did, like my predecessor did, and the lighthouse will keep its light burning, turned by the hands of keepers, watching, always watching, waiting for the next person who needs to disappear so badly that they can't say no when the light asks them to stay. Drop your verdict in the comments. Wait, what?